Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All the slides that I'm going to show you today are meant as indicators of possibilities of digital business development, even though none of them concerns precisely digital business. In this way, I'd like to express my deep belief that the European Green Deal is in fact an idea that can accelerate the economy and digitization. First of all, it's digital transformation. This time, this transformation will be supported by a new legal environment so that we could reach the 2050 goal, so that the industry and the economy stopped hurting and harming the environment. Throughout my presentation, I'm going to focus on digital matters, taking into account two major aspects. First of all, why do we need to accelerate? And then, is it a change of direction or perhaps a continuation of an existing course? Now, I'd like to emphasize that we have the right potential to change the situation and to attain the goals, the climatic, environmental, and developmental goals by 2050. I would like to reach you visually to a large extent, perhaps to a greater extent than by words. So please pay attention to the screen. The first presentation that was given by the members of the European Commission always contained information about what's in the document. First of all, it's about the mobilization, activation of all mechanisms that accelerate innovative activity. At the bottom, you can see the goals. First of all, Europe is to become a technology leader in terms of sustainable technologies friendly to the environment, and the first objective is to prevent the pressure on increasing the temperature on Earth. So it's based on an inclusion strategy, and so that all participants could be equally involved. The authors of the strategy displayed some horizontal thinking here. First of all, the climate needs to we need to make sure for the industry to stop harming the environment by 2050, but at the same time, these toxicological effects of the industry should be reduced to negligible levels. When we talk about provision of clean energy, the idea is not only to protect natural resources, but also to renew them, to restore biodiversity. When we talk about e-mobility, electric transport, we also think about improvements in agriculture. When we are talking about the construction industry, we're also thinking of how to use this industry, the buildings, as important critical infrastructure, to incorporate it into a long whole chains of values, including logistics. So a holistic approach is critical. Without making the chains of value longer and without transforming them into a network of values, we won't be able to control this challenge, to bring it into control. Now, what I want to emphasize is the crucial problem of environmental protection. Has been under discussion for more than 10 years by the digital industry. In 2009, the digital industry in our Chamber of Commerce for Electronics and Communication, we started to take into a closer look within the framework program, and we learned about the smart grid idea in 2012. We had a 2-day conference focused only on that and the role of the industry in that respect. So we launched a discussion into the need to modernize the infrastructure. 2012 was devoted in its entirety to considerations about how to develop prosumer market. 2013, we knew already that first of all we need to deal with innovativeness in our sector and renewable energy sources. We decided we had to start development work on e-mobility and low-carbon economy. We did not forget about the legal environment. We emphasized the fact that for telecommunications to help the market, we would have to modify the legal basis. We also remember that we have to develop a transition path from carbon-based economy to hydrogen-based economy. Now we forge those ideas into a program that emphasized to an even greater extent innovativeness and ecological aspects. In 2014, we emphasized the fact that without regulations that would prevent the movement of energy-intensive production out of the European Union. In other words, without preventing carbon leakage, we would not be able to attain the other 4 strategic goals. And again, we emphasized renewable sources of energy and e-mobility. Now, very specifically, we presented a program for supporting innovativeness. Also in 2014, we developed a platform for a sectoral program with a budget of almost 1 billion zloty. We talked to all stakeholders in the program. The program was launched, but the resistance of the non-private sector of the electrical and energy sectors was stronger than the pressure of a new technology digital sector. We understood that social communication was insufficient, so the following year we developed a broader program to include general economic goals with a focus on the digital direction of economic growth, the need to specialize in industry, and the need to quickly digitize the infrastructure. We decided that only this way of communicating our goals we would be able to attain the green objective. So this policy was translated into what is now called in the European Green Deal, it's now called the inclusion, or making sure that everybody participates. So we developed a 3D model where between education and lifelong learning we placed also security, financing, and lawmaking. Without knowledge, you cannot make progress in those areas. We also decided that without including the industry and infrastructure in this integrated model, and also without including the state-owned sector and state-run companies, without including all management levels and all business organizations, NGOs, we would not be able to make progress. And indeed, now in 2020, seeing how many organizations are here, how the sector is diversified from finances to construction, you can see that we've done our promotional work well. This is what we've been focused on in the past 5 years. Now, I explained to you why our progress was so slow, but in the government's strategy of sustainable development, well, that program is consistent with our postulates, with our ideas. So it's all there, but we have problems with executing that program, implementing the program. So speed is of the essence. Faster implementation, moving from words to deeds. Now, I'd like to tell you why social pressure is going to mount in this area. First of all, we need to realize that social reactions to changes are rather slow. It's generational change, individual changes, group experiences, national experiences. These are not global or continental experiences. Now, the most integrated indicator of economic development, which is the extraction and combustion of fossil fuels, as we can see, the most damaging things have happened over the past 70 years. So within the lifespan of one 70-year-old person who can well be still alive. So society may not subjectively understand, emotionally understand that something terrible has happened, because societies gain experience in generations. As you can see, the slope of the curve, it corresponds to the extraction of all raw materials, not only fuels. Without, for example, steel, you cannot implement the extraction of coal. So the implementation of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, and went hand in hand with other kinds of energy development. So all of those factors that contributed to this state of imbalance currently. So without taking all that into account, we can't understand what's going on a global scale. The climate is a global issue. The first pressure is industrial pressure on the climate. The other pressure is the increase in the world's population. On the one hand, okay, we can see the same curve. We have tripled the world's population of the past 70 years. Now, something else, something important has happened. This tripling also means a substantial increase in the quality of life. I try to find the best indicator. And I think it's a consumption of meat. The consumption of meat per person on Earth has doubled. So we can see how much this has increased agricultural pressure on the environment. So we have seen the pressures, the stressors. Now we can see the results. Now, please pay attention to the figures here. Now, the knowledge of figures about the scale of impact on the environment, it's not something that we obtained in the middle of the 20th century, the first figures, and especially data about what the biosphere is, biosystem. It's publications from this decade. It's a paper published in 2018. For the first time then, I read about the structure of biomass, the recycling factor, because right now we manufacture, and the earth carries out the bulk of recycling, and we must take over that responsibility from the earth. That's at the core of the European Green Deal. Now we need to realize what it is, what biomass is about. Now, the first thing that we learn is that biomass is primarily composed of plants. Now, this figure is pretty obvious. The second one about bacteria is it was quite surprising, because as a matter of fact, it was said that we don't know bacteria too well. We know perhaps 1% of all bacteria. We don't know how they affect us. Now, all else outside of plants and bacteria is 5%. Now, this was quite surprising, and even greater surprise for me, but also for other specialists in ecology, is that the vast majority of biomass is present not in seas but on land. 86% of biomass is found on land, so our activity is of a much greater consequence for the ecosystem that we previously thought. Now let me go back to the issue of a human being for a while. In our experience of many centuries, now you can hear that in the media. It's impossible for the 1/100th of a biomass, that is humans, for us to have done so much damage. Well, it has been possible. We have been able to carry out extraordinary extermination. We have destroyed 83% biomass of wild mammals, 80% of aquatic mammals, half of plants, and 15% of fish. Therefore, we don't know what we have done to the bacteria. We don't have data on that. So what we can see is that we have eliminated 50% of the total biomass of the Earth. We have also damaged biodiversity substantially. I hope that all people in the digital industry can see that this is a database. This is a huge task in terms of data collection. This paper was a major digital enterprise involving a substantial percentage of Internet of Things, modeling computers, supercomputers, so on and so forth. So we are still talking about what digital sector must do at the level of infrastructure, production, finance to change the situation, because this is the scale of the problem. Please take note of what has happened in terms of stock keeping. 96% of mammals are controlled, or humans and livestock. Now 70% of the birds are birds grown by people. Now let's go back to aggregates. Now that was about particular data. Now at the end of the 20th century, we asked ourselves a question about the efficiency of the Earth's recycling capacity. Experts and researchers realized at the beginning of the 1970s, and they published the report of Rome in 1972, that the situation is getting out of hand. The first publication striving to grasp the entirety of human impact was published at the end of the 1990s. Now, those data gave rise to an organization which was established to monitor the data. So in other words, we want to determine what percentage of our activity cannot be recycled by the Earth. Now, this decrease in biomass. Now, as a result of this decrease in biomass, even though we have lived for less than half a year right now, this year we need more than 1.4 Earths to restore what we have destroyed. So decision-making resulting from these data occurred only when we found that all those curves from 1950 up to now are strictly correlated. So it's not a discussion about climatic fluctuations, orbital precession. Everything points to the fact that since 1950 we've seen the effects of the industry in all dimensions. On the right-hand side you can see a digital model that needs to be still improved, because obviously it does not predict all important phenomena. The data from many digital systems have not been integrated yet to improve this thermal model. So for the time being, the worst case scenario is unfolding right now, the Hansen model. So what influence does it have right now on our activity? We as a digital industry should focus on what is damaging to human beings. So we need to map the cycle of matter to stop the deposition of harmful materials in the form of waste. And if we produce waste, we need to think about how to recycle them. Then we need to stop toxins without developing digital models and developing the cycles for these products. It will be counterproductive. Whenever we decided on reducing emissions or reducing our effects on the environment in terms of toxins, for example, without a holistic approach, the final effect was just opposite. And this also happened with electric cars. Latest publications of German engineers on the actual effects of cars on the environment shows that, well, we have not deteriorated the situation, but without solving the problem of coal mining, the situation will not improve by even a small proportion. Now, we cannot avoid a serious migration conflicts arising from a climate change, environmental, let's say, deterioration, neither those resulting from rising sea levels, but we can obviously undertake measures to assuage those phenomena, to alleviate them. I don't think this is really our fault, because human species was not able to predict all the consequences of its activity, but we have developed a number of mechanisms over the past decade. The digital industry is ready. It's a real enabler. We offer technologies that can change the situation quickly. Now, of importance is to follow a certain order of development. Two infrastructural issues are critical. First of all, data collection and the provision of the entire economy with telecom networks. We want to show this by the organization of this forum. The largest part of the room is devoted to telecommunications. We're very happy that the new Green Deal takes into account the fact that IPCI programs will support also telecommunications investment. The other important element is the infrastructure that must be reformed if we want to include renewable sources of energy. So a smart grid is inevitable. Now, one remark concerning the local communications or messages flowing from countries which are less developed. Indeed, delays in that respect may lead to lost competitiveness, because right now our energy cost is higher than those countries that have implemented green energy to a greater extent. So it's not something we cannot afford. It's something that we must not be able not to afford, because otherwise we would lose competitiveness.
And here are different activities of the ICT industry. Creating digital imaging, digital inventory, digitization of value chains, and so on and so forth. And without building a big digital picture of what's going on, all kinds of decisions might be faulty. On the lawmaking level, we need to have a full picture, starting from demography and ending with inventory of all kinds of digital systems. If you are interested in designing the legal framework, I encourage you to think and to dig deeper to find out more about this slide. And our Chamber of Commerce is there to assist you with all necessary resources. If you need articles or knowledge that we based this slide on. We need education. Without education, nothing will be possible. We need to build a long life learning system. Without that, we will not be able to carry out the technological progress, because we will need people to carry it out, and we'll need social acceptance, and this requires knowledge. Working on legal changes, we need to take into account whole concepts when it comes to mapping, when it comes to inventory, when it comes to digitization, which is giving the digital layer to all kinds of products and services. If we do this, it will be possible to create the big picture. And it won't be possible without supercomputers, without blockchain, without scattered planning, and without providing every household with a broadband. And there is one more thing that we need to remember. And probably the only thing that is not possible without involving social media. A traditional consumptionism, which is based on the more I have, the better, has to be changed into a new paradigm. It's better to buy less, more expensive, but to buy better quality. This is the kind of paradigm that will enable us to grow economy, but also to support our green approach. We'll be able to use our resources better, both natural and business resources. I could go on for an hour discussing this new paradigm, but we need a great change in business models. That's actually ICT industry that started with software as a service, a production plant as a service, car sharing as a service. We need support of financial industry. Without the support from financial industry, our change won't be possible. Let's have a look at this map. 2020. The European Union says we need to compile all kinds of data by the end of this year to be able to prepare a deeper legal reform. Professor Wagner and Ms. Rodriguez are going to discuss it in detail, I hope. Those people deal with the implementation of a new legal system on a daily basis. I hope we can introduce this new ecosystem by 2030, and I hope we will have introduced 5G and real data gathering by that time. Then, in the next decade, I hope we will fully deploy network economy, and I hope that by 2050 we will reach at least near zero emission economy, and we will limit the amount of toxins in our environment. But we need to be supported by everybody. Thank you very much for your attention.